broken leg.
Good evening. Good evening and welcome. My name is George Gray. I'm the president of the Medfield Historical Society. I'd like to welcome you all this evening, especially all the members of the Medfield Fire Department. We're delighted to have you here. Richard DeSorga has a wonderful program for you this evening, and I'm sure you'll enjoy it. I'll only spend 30 seconds with a little administrative stuff, and I'll turn it right over to Richard. For those of you who aren't members and would have interest in the Society, we have a copy of our latest newsletter here that was just mailed out a couple of weeks ago, so feel free to take one afterward. If you're so inclined to consider membership, we have membership cards here also. Without further ado, I'm going to introduce Richard. He has a full program this evening, and I promise not to speak more than 1 minute. So, Richard DeSorga.
Thank you. I think you'll enjoy this. We have a special treat by having Walter Reynolds and Joe Ryan, as well as our current chief, Bill Kingsbury, who will also be able to reminisce a little and tell some stories. And then I've asked Bill if he would, at the end, let us know where the fire department is now and where we're going into the future. And maybe give a sales pitch for the truck that's coming up at town meeting also. Let me start. I'm going to start back. I'm going to go up to about World War II, and then I'm going to turn over to Walter and Joe, and they're going to take it from that time point. In the early colonial period of our history, due to the fact that the first homes in Medfield had thatched roofs, and on account of the great danger of fire, by law, every household was required to provide a ladder for his house or be fined. In the early years of Medfield's history, the town was watched over by watchmen who circulated around the town to watch for any danger of fires. The Watch and Ward Society actually was first started in Boston in 1630 and organized officially in 1636. All young men aged 16 and older were required to take a turn on watch duty without pay. The major duty was to watch for fires. Here in Medfield and throughout New England, men were chosen each year to burn the woods. This old Native American practice was kept up for many years. The woods referred to lay in the outermost portions of the town. The practice enabled the land to be kept free of trees and provided pasture land for the cattle. These burnt lands were often called herd walks. 3 men were generally chosen from each part of town, north, south, and west. The fires were not allowed to come near the buildings, and for this reason, the area around the houses themselves soon became surrounded with bushes and small trees. During the Indian attack on Medfield, the Native Americans would use these bushes and trees as a hiding place before setting fire to the settlers' houses. In 1654, Peter Adams, John Partridge, and Isaac Chenery were chosen to burn the woods. Town records show this practice kept up until 1682. Now, by far the worst fire ever to hit Medfield occurred on the morning of February 21st, 1676, during what became known as the King Philip War. Medfield was attacked somewhere between 300 and 1,000 Native Americans, and the first fire actually broke forth from the house and the barn of Samuel Morse, who lived near the present intersection of Main and Pound Street. Flames soon roared through the Thomas Thurston homestead, located at the site of the present middle school. Thurston suffered additional grave loss, for 2 of their 7 children were mortally wounded in the raid, Margaret, age 7, and Samuel, age 18 months. In the same area, the Benjamin Clark house was also burnt. His replacement house, rebuilt in 1680, is the present Peak House. The following homes were also burnt within a short time after Morse's house went up in flames. The Samuel Bullen house, located near the present corner of Phillip and South Street. The James Allen house, located on South Street near the Norfolk town line. The Robert Mason house, located on Green Street. The Nathaniel Whiting house, located near the present corner of Pine and North Street, about across the street from Ian Thompson's house. Thomas White lost his house and barn located on White's Lane now Green Street, about where Bobby Kennedy's house is, along with 6 cattle and his horse. Down near Millbrook, Henry Adams had only time to see his mill go up into flames before he was struck in the neck by a bullet and fell dead in his doorway. His 2 children escaped before his house also was totally inflamed. Thomas Mason and his 2 sons were killed, and their home on North Street, near the intersection of Harding and North Street, also was torched. John Partridge homestead, across the street from Mason's, also went up into flames. Smoke then billowed from the entire Castle Hill area of North Street, near the present Hunt Club, as the Sampson Frary, Samuel White, John Fisher, Joseph Warren, Joseph Allen homesteads all went up into flames. The Bridge Street section was totally wiped out. It was here the Indians left a most severe mark, leaving all 10 homesteads there in flames. Also to go up into flames was the Gershom Whirlock house near the corner of Main and Causeway Street, and the Joseph Bullen house located off West Main Street. On the bank of the Charles River, then Medfield, now Millis, the Indians set fire to the Jonathan Adams house, along with the William Allen and Peter Calley homesteads. 3 bridges that crossed the Charles River at that time were all burnt. In Medfield itself, some 32 houses besides barns and outbuildings and 2 mills were burnt. About the same number of houses remained standing. The loss sustained by the inhabitants amounted to about £2,000 in British money. It took years for the town to fully recover. 17 settlers were killed. This is indeed the greatest fire loss ever experienced by the town of Medfield. Now, we do not see any attempt at town-wide fire coverage until the 1820s. That is when the town obtains its first fire engine. Now, we've been unable to determine the exact date. I know Bill Kingsford called me about a year ago trying to find the exact starting point of the fire department, but the records simply say that the engine was obtained several years prior to 1832. So we could probably put the start of the fire department probably somewhere in the 1820s. The engine, that first engine, was kept in Woodard's barn, which was located where the United Church of Christ is now. They actually built a lean-to attached to the barn, and that served as the fire station or engine house. With this first engine came the first engine company. This would, in my belief, put the date of the start, again, of the Medfield Fire Department in the 1820s with the arrival of that first fire engine. In 1832, Bill said this sounds typical of Medfield voters. In 1832, town meeting appropriated $100 to build an actual engine house. They didn't have to use the lean-to. The vote passed the town meeting, but then was rescinded at the next town meeting, and so the fire engine had to remain in Woodard's barn. In 1834, 2 years later, money was appropriated for an actual engine house that was brought up at town meeting. This time the residents did vote the $100, and we built our first fire station. It was located right next to us where the parsonage, the U house is, right here. In 1835, town meeting voted that the old fire engine be repaired at the expense of the town. This engine would serve the town of Medfield until 1853. In 1853, a new Hooneman fire engine, the town's second one, was purchased at the expense of $600, and a new engine company was formed. The following year, a new 2-story engine house was built on the north corner of North Street and James Avenue, directly across the street from where I am right now. And you can see a picture of it, which we found. Here's a picture of the old hat factory up here. And if you look to, you're right, over here, you can see, here's the engine house or fire station that was built in that following year, replacing the one that was over here. Now, there's also some pictures, and I don't know the exact date. By looking at the cars, it looks like it's in the 1930s when that actually burnt down. It contained a meeting room for the engine company on the second floor. There were 26 firefighters in the engine company in 1854. Now, for pay, the town canceled the poll tax, which was $1.50 a year for all members of the fire department. In 1859, the town adopted its first bylaws, and it included a section on the engine company. Part of the bylaws reads as follows: there shall be an engine company which shall not exceed 45 members, including officers. Such members to be appointed and removed at the pleasure of the Board of Selectmen. No person who is less than 20 years of age shall be appointed. Another part of the bylaw says the company shall have a foreman and 2 assistant foremen and a clerk who shall be chosen by the company annually at a meeting to be held in May. It also says that it's the duty of the foreman to see that the engine, the apparatus, the engine house are all kept neat, clean, and in order for immediate use, and to preserve order and discipline at all times in the company. The officers and members shall receive annually from the town the amount assessed as a poll tax for state, county, and town purposes, or for either. Now, in 1872, the engine house that you see here in front of me was sold, and a new firehouse was fitted up under the new town hall. Medfield, for the first time, builds a town hall. Money for the building of that first town hall was given to the town by George Chenery. In his will, he left over $26,000 for the town to build the town hall. It was opened and dedicated on September the 10th, 1872. The fire station was located down below in the back. Now, less than 2 years after the town hall opened, it burnt down, including the destruction of our fire engine and the area used as the engine house. The building was thoroughly on fire when the alarm was given, and the citizens in the engine company were thus compelled to stand and see the beautiful edifice fall into a heap of ruin. They were powerless to do anything to save it. In a meeting called just weeks after the burning, it was voted to rebuild the town hall. A building committee was appointed with the instructions not to exceed $20,000. A portion of the tower at the southwest corner was left standing and was utilized by being incorporated into the new structure. Now, the new town hall was rededicated on November 2nd that same year, 1874. A new fire engine and apparatus were then purchased at the cost of $1,750. That is the engine now under control of the town that we have in the back of in the shed in the back of the fire station. 1876 was also the year, according to Tilden's History of Medfield, that Medfield was visited by the fire fiend. First, the South School, located at the intersection of High and South Street, burned to the ground. Then the Orthodox Congregational Church, now the United Church of Christ, with all its contents in the new chapel located near the church, were totally destroyed by fire. Finally, the straw shop, located directly behind you, of D.D. Curtis was burned to the ground. The straw shop at the time was called the Old Townsend House. Despite heroic efforts by the engine company, the flames swept steadily until the building was burned to the ground. A new and spacious hat factory was then rebuilt, and that's the present building we see over there today. In 1877, a hook and ladder truck was purchased and equipped at the cost of $300. And a second company was formed, known as the Excelsior Hook and Ladder Company No. 1. Also, 1877 was the year of the very first Fireman's Ball. It started, music at the time was by the 9-piece Brigham Orchestra of Marlborough. In 1879, we saw the purchase of 2 40-gallon chemical fire extinguishers that were procured for the use of the town at the cost of $90. Each member of the engine company and each member of the hook and ladder company received $7 annually for a year's service to the town. Total cost of the town budget was $360. This was the first time firefighters were paid directly by the town. Previous to that, the firemen only received the amount of their poll tax being paid for. Also that year, the Hale straw hat factory down on South Street burned to the ground. 1880, the town voted to pay the firemen again $7, but the engineers now got $12. 1885, give you an idea, the population of Medfield was 1,500, and there were 288 dwellings, all made of wood in the town. In 1886, the total fire department budget approved at town meeting was $800. In 1887, in cooperation with the straw hat factory across the street, the fire department was able to use the steam pump at the hat factory and attaching hose to the hydrant, which is still out there. They were now able to throw a stream of water upon the roof of the hat factory, as well as the churches and the businesses in the center of town. Piping was then installed and 3 hydrants were located in the center, giving the town fire protection in the village area. In 1887, the house and stable of the late Albert Wiley on East Main Street was entirely destroyed by fire. Owing to the delay in getting the men together and the breakdown of the hook and ladder truck, the fire department was unable to render any service. The Poor Farm, or the Elms House, which was located up on West Street by Bridge Street, burned to the ground that year also. The fire originated from a defect in the chimney. At a special town meeting, it was voted to rebuild the Elms House, or Poor Farm, and that $1,000 in addition to the insurance was granted. 1889, the fire department recommended building 2 reservoirs, one on North Street and one on Pleasant Street, for the use of fighting fires. Pipes running from the hat factory filled both of these reservoirs. These reservoirs would give the town greater central water supply. Now, Ord's Block, which is where Master's Touch is located, formerly occupied by Will's Hardware, was totally destroyed by fire. James Ord had one of the largest stocks of stove, furniture, and crockery in the area. We actually have one of the bowls in the back that survived that fire. George is holding it up there. Madeline Harding, many of you remember Madeline Harding, she had that, and she donated it to the Historical Society, and you can still see all the black around the edges there. The building itself was estimated at $3,500. The general feeling was that the fire started from the coal stove on the first floor. Ord's Block was first built in the fall of 1882, and believe it or not, in the winter of 1883-1884, the upper floor was used as an indoor skating rink. The total fire department budget in 1881 is now up to $800. The water reservoir requests received town meeting approval, and they were built on Pleasant Street with a 1,600-gallon capacity, on North Street with a 9,000-gallon capacity, and on Adams Street with a 9,000-gallon capacity. In 1893, the Moses Clark Bonnet Wire Factory, they made the wire for the hat factory, which was built in 1873, located down on Frary Street, near Dale Street, was struck by lightning and burned to the ground. After the firemen tried for several minutes to put the fire out, the well water supply failed. A line of hose was then run 1,500 feet from the hydrant at the hat factory all the way down Frary Street to the end, enabling the house next door to be saved. Loss exceeded $1,800, more than 280 shades of silk, thousands of pounds of yarn, and many tons of wire were destroyed. Marshall later erected a much larger factory in the same location. That too would burn down in 1911. 1894, town meeting voted additional funds to put the hook and ladder truck into first-class condition. 4 feet were added to the truck to accommodate the ladders. The fire department log of 1894 lists some of the following. May 19, the Senate Depot train station on Park Street burned to the ground, cause struck by lightning, total loss. August 18, fire at Rocky Woods, and these records is always a fire at Rocky Woods. Cause escape from a man burning brush, 50 acres of woods burnt. 1895, the fire department the fire department budget was now increased the first time to $1,000. Samuel Mitchell was elected foreman of the Medfield Engine Company. 1896 saw a major fire up in Noon Hill. The newspaper account reads as follows. A fire left burning at a camp along the Charles River near Dwight's Bridge resulted in over 200 acres of woodland being burnt. Hundreds of cords of wood piled up and ready for market were destroyed along with 2 houses. A strong gale whipped the flames up more than 40 feet high. The fire roared through the pines like a furnace. Loss was estimated at $2,000. But for the fact that the wind died out, the whole of Noon Hill would have been burnt over. It was one of the worst fires in the history of Medfield. Great credit was due to the fire department and the town citizens who responded without want of pay. Also in 1896, another fire at Rocky Woods on April the 12th burned 45 acres of woodland. 1897, 2-year-old Edward Frost burnt to death in his home when a kerosene lamp overturned. He died at Framingham Hospital. 1898 Fire Department log lists some of the following. March the 23rd, fire at the Medfield Inn, which was located again across from us next to the Hat Factory. Damage large, loss estimated at $5,000, cause bursting of a lamp. July the 21st, fire at the Second Congregational Church, now the UCC, caused lightning damage. Lightning tore away the entire north side of the spire. Damage from the fire itself, however, was small. July the 30th, fire in the barn of Hamlet White, 200 North Street. Damage small, cause struck by lightning. September the 20th, fire in William Weiker's barn on Main and Bridge Street. Total loss, cause overturned lantern. 1899, the Medfield Town Meeting increased the pay of the firemen now to $12 a year plus the poll tax. In addition, they were paid 25 cents per hour while actually fighting the fires. Major fires of the year burnt to the ground the Newell House on Bridge Street, the cider and sawmill owned by William Weiker on Bridge Street, the house of Mrs. Albert Gay burned to the ground. At the house of Esther Strang on High Street, the family nurse, Delilah Kennedy, was burnt to death, and the house was burned to the ground. A thorough investigation was unable to put blame on anyone. 1900, the fire department budget now is up to $1,200. The house of Charles Werner, 27 Pound Street across from the middle school, was totally destroyed by fire. 1905, for the first time, fire escapes were added to Town Hall. In one of the worst fires of 1906, the Blood Brothers grain store on Park Street burned to the ground, resulting in a total loss, estimated at $5,000, of which $3,000 was stock. Rebuilding began immediately. Also that year, the poultry house of Robert Hardy was totally destroyed by fire. All 500 chickens were burnt alive. A lamp in the brooder was believed to have been the cause. 1907, the selectmen appointed J. Allen Cole, Waldo Kingsbury, and Fred Laverty engineers to the fire department. All three called for a more modern means of fighting fires, and they requested that the town purchase a gasoline fire engine. Waldo Kingsbury of the department also voiced strong concern over the serious lack of available water in town needed to fight fires. In 1908, at the recommendation of the fire department, the town voted to build a fourth water reservoir for fire protection. This was located at the corner of South and Pound Street and was kept full by neighboring wells. A written permit was now required to burn rubbish on your own premises. The permit had to be obtained from our fire warden, Waldo Kingsbury. Edwin White, who worked up at the state hospital, lost his 9-year-old daughter, Laura, and 9-month-old son, Clyde, when they were burnt to death by a fire in their home on the corner of South and Oak Street. The building itself was totally destroyed. In 1908, Medfield purchases its first gasoline fire engine at the cost of $2,000. The fire engine had powerful pumps, which were fitted with an engine such as used in an automobile. It pumped 300 gallons of water a minute through each of the two streams and could throw the water 125 feet. The engine did not travel on its own power, but was drawn by horses. With the purchase of the new gasoline fire engine, the old fire engine company of 40 men disbanded, and a new company of 12 men had charge of the new gasoline engine. Fire escapes were then added to the Ralph Wheelock School on Pleasant Street. Total enrollment of the school back then was 288. 1909 saw the Joseph Breck House and Barn on Hospital Road, occupied by Jim Tuberty and family, destroyed by fire. Breck House had been built in 1780. One of the worst fires in many years Also, one of the most suspicious fires Medfield has had took place when the American Steam Packing Company on North Street, down near the Dover line, burned to the ground. The telephone lines had been cut, preventing the sending of an alarm. Loss was reported more than $10,000. At the time of the fire, 10 men were employed in the packing company. The building was completely rebuilt, and within 3 weeks, a new 150-foot by 25-foot, 3-story plant was completed. This is a good one for, we have Selectman Thompson here.
Yes, yes, he is.
This will, you'll like this one.
From the sound of your voice, I don't think so.
Unbeknownst to the fire department, the selectmen used the town fire whistle on New Year's Eve to blow in the new year. Firefighters responded to the whistle in full ranks, including the horses, only to find out there was no fire. As the newspaper article says, a madder set of men it would be hard to find when they discovered the real cause of the alarm. The newspaper went on to say, they better be entitled to their pay. And I trust that the selectmen will grant it. Else they may fail to respond at future alarms when they really need it. For the first time in 1910, fire drills began to be practiced in the schools. They were taking place once a month. A new horse-drawn hose wagon was purchased in 1910. It was built by Cushman and Baker Carriage, which were located right here at the end of Baker's Pond. In 1911, town meeting voted to build a 5th water reservoir for fire protection. It was located at the corner of Main and Brook Street. Also in 1911, the old Marshall wire factory I mentioned earlier burned for a second time. The fire department appropriation of 1912 was now up to $1,600. A telephone was then installed in the engine room of the hat factory to be used by the town exclusively for fire alarms. A whistle for the fire alarm was then located on the hat factory. It would stay there until 1930 when it was moved to Town Hall. Now before this time, the Unitarian Church here and the Baptist Church bells had been used for sounding fires. In 1954, the alarm system was removed from the telephone company office and moved to the police station, which was then at Town Hall. And the alarm was set up strictly for the 13 blows used for civil defense. A new system was installed at the state hospital in 1954, which handled our fires. In 1972, that system was removed from the state hospital and placed in the police station again at Town Hall. And in 1977, it was removed to the present police station on North Street. The Dedham Transcript reported in 1912 that a band of gypsies had arrived in town, and shortly thereafter, losses of money and hens were reported. The fire department was called out by the selectmen, and they drove the gypsies out of town. A hose laying contest with area fire departments was held in Medfield, sponsored by the Gasoline Engine Company. Cash prizes of $5, $10, $15 were awarded. The fastest time was posted by the Millis firemen, 11.1 seconds, followed by Rentham at 11.2 and Attleboro at 12.4. A dance then followed the contest with Alan Kingsbury acting as floor director. I have no idea what a floor director does. In 1913, an all-night electric light for use of the fire department was placed in the rear of Town Hall, where the fire station was located. The fire alarm was now being sounded directly by the telephone operators. In 1913, fire totally destroyed the 2.5 frame-storied house on Hospital Road, owned by H.B. McCumber. The fire started in the L of the house over the kitchen. Now, the fire department was greatly hampered in its work by the fire apparatus sinking into the soft ground. The house was built about 1873. Loss was estimated at $5,000. The firemen were able to save the stable and most of the furniture in the house. 1914, the fire department responded to a call of help by the town of Dover. During a major fire, which destroyed the Hodgson Portable House Factory, Medfield gasoline engine responded, along with the engine company number 1, 7 pairs of horses and 30 men. The firemen were greatly delayed by the deep mud through which the heavy apparatus had to be dragged. The Hotel Gerald, down on West Mill Street, which had kind of a shaky reputation to begin with, was totally destroyed by fire. Loss was estimated at $2,500. Fire of unknown origin caused several $100s worth of damage to the rear of the shops owned by Colonel Mitchell on North Street and occupied by Roy Kerr Company plumbers and Harry Zettler Taylor. Prompt work by the fire department with the new 40-gallon chemical engine prevented serious loss. A severe woods and brush fire, which started near Green Street, burnt over 300 acres, spreading down to the Childs Estate on Main Street and as far as David Meany's house on East Main Street, roughly opposite the Sunoco gas station today. Firefighters responded at 9:30 in the morning, and they fought that blaze with assistance from Dover until 6 o'clock that night. During this time period, the fire department was still now using horse-drawn equipment. The apparatus was stored in the fire station located underneath Town Hall, but the horses were kept up at the Willard Howard Stable, which is where CVS is today. Now, during a fire, the horses would have to be brought on the run from the stable, down Main Street, through the square, down the hill on James Avenue, into the yard at the back of Town Hall. The horses would then be attached to the apparatus and driven to the fire with bells clanging. Water for fighting the fires was purchased by the Medfield Water Company and was stored in the reservoirs or large cisterns located under the streets in various sections of the downtown area. The town of Medfield would not have its own municipal water supply until 1921. In 1917, the house and barn of Horace Allen on Curve Street was totally destroyed by fire of unknown causes. Total loss was $3,000. The house had just been built the year before. 1918, the house of Stephen Sprague on Nebo Street was totally destroyed by fire. This marked the second time a home on that same spot had been burnt within a few years. At a special town meeting in 1919, $5,500 was voted to purchase the fire department a motor apparatus. The town report gives the following report. After testing out several makes of trucks, we decided to purchase 2 Republican chassis. A 1-ton, which was equipped by the O.J. Childs Company of New York, with 2 35-gallon chemical tanks, ladders, extinguishers, etc., and a 1.5-ton chassis that was equipped in town by Albert Dean with steel body for hose, brackets, and ladders, etc. Both pieces were painted here in town by Fred Smith. Now, the fire of August the 26th at the Medfield Junction was the first alarm that the chemical truck responded to, and it was on the job in 8 minutes after the alarm was struck. The fire department strongly recommended the purchase of an auto pump that year. They said, we were obliged to pay out over $225 in repairs on the old pump this year against our better judgment in order to keep it going until we can get something better. We need 500 more feet of hose. We recommend a budget of $1,200 this year if we get the new pump. If we keep the old pump, we're going to recommend a budget of $1,800. They got the new pump. With the purchase of the new motorized apparatus, the Medfield Hook and Ladder Company went out of existence after 42 years. The company was merged into the existing engine company, and it's been that way ever since. Also in 1919, due to the striking telephone operators, the Medfield Telephone Exchange closed. Because Medfield now had no fire alarm system, but had to depend on the telephone for reports and location of fires, local officials feared the town was seriously handicapped in regard to its fire protection. In 1920, the title of Chief of the Fire Department was used for the first time, with Alan Kingsbury named our first Fire Chief and Lawrence Dewar the first Assistant Chief. 1921 saw the worst fire in a century. With the exception of the time when Medfield was burnt in the King Philip War, one of the greatest fires ever to strike Medfield took place some 84 years ago in 1921. At the time, it was called the worst fire in a century. It left behind a blackened swath 2 miles wide, 2 miles long, right through the town. It was believed to have been started by sparks from a locomotive near the former Medfield State Hospital. Fires starting by sparks from locomotives were a common cause of fires that plagued Medfield for many, many years and kept the town's fire department very busy. Once the 1921 fire began in the area of the train tracks across from the former hospital in the north end of town, it gained strength with greater and greater intensity. Added to the fact that there were incredibly strong winds, a perfect storm scenario was created. The high winds caused large clumps of burning leaves to blow high into the air, and they scattered the flames in all directions. Once the fire had started into the pine timber, there was no stopping it. The flames, taking on a life of their own, roared south and east across Adams Street and Harding Streets. As the housing developments of today were not yet built, most of the town and the area impacted were open fields, brush, and woodland. The flames coming across Adams Street, where the Memorial School is today, took the large 2-story house, barn, and outbuildings on North Street owned by George Ellis, along with all their contents. The fire was being battled by the Medfield Fire Department, but it was now out of control due to the fierce winds. Alarms went out for assistance from Millis, Dover, Walpole, and Dedham. All 5 town fire departments began to fight the blaze as it crossed over North Street and headed up Pine and Green Streets, threatening Medfield Center and all the homes along Summer Street. Meanwhile, emergency crews at the state hospital continued to battle the flames, which were now encroaching the hospital property, putting fright into the over 2,000 patients living there. Smoke was reported so dense that firemen were unable to get near enough to fight the fire. Town residents began responding to assist the firefighters in response to Medfield's call for help and fear that the flames would sweep through the buildings of Medfield Center. A special train was sent by the New Haven Railroad with 200 men to assist in fighting the now out-of-control blaze. The fire swept across the area that is today Low Mason Road and all the area of Pine Needle Park. It was here in the tall pines that the wind swept flames could be seen for miles. Firefighters decided to make a stand along Hartford Street and Main Street as the fire soon engulfed all the land along the present Hatters Hill and Pettizini Drive area and entered into even the more timberland of Rocky Woods. Firefighters and volunteers, now numbering in the hundreds, mounted a last-ditch defense effort along Hartford Street and Main Street with the hope they could stop the inferno from crossing Hartford. If not, there would be no controlling it, as it would race into Dover and Walpole. For 7 long hours, the firefighters and volunteers fought the flames. Their defense along Hartford Street and Main Street held, but in its wake, more than 2,500 acres of fields, brush, and timberland were destroyed. In today's map, to give you an idea what that fire would include if it happened today, it would include Adams Street, West Mill Street, West Street, Pine Street, North Street, Dale Street, Low Mason Road, Mead Ave, Castle Ave, Johns Ave, Renton Ave, Summer Street, Pine Street, Green Street, Brook Street, Earl Kerr Road, Newport Lane, Kenny Road, all the streets and homes in Pine Needle Park, all of the Hawthorne estates, all of the Overfield estates off of Pine Street, Winter Street, Maplewood Road, Scott Road, Cedar Lane, Spruce Way, all of the Hatters Hill area, and all of the Pettizini Drive area. In 1922, Samuel Mitchell replaced Alan Kingsbury as chief of the fire department. The fire department budget now reached $2,000. Town meeting also voted the sum of $4,200 to purchase a Howe Rio 350-gallon motor pumping fire engine. Fireman's pay was now $12 a year and $1 for the first hour of fighting the fire and 75 cents per hour for each additional hour. 1923, arson was believed to have been the cause of 2 major fires. Bertram Smith of South Street had his barn full of hay, carriage house, hen house, and outbuildings destroyed. Benjamin Kimball, also of South Street, near Rocky Lane, had his barn with over 50 tons of hay farming tools, 8 cattle, 2 horses destroyed by the flames. The greatest fire in 1923, however, was that of the second burning of Town Hall. For the second time in 50 years, the Town Hall burnt down. The fire occurred early in the morning of January the 17th, during bitter cold weather. When the alarm came into the fire station, located in the lower level of Town Hall, it was reported that the dispatcher asked, "Where's the fire?" To which the operator responded, "Over your head." The entire inside of the building was gutted, leaving only a partial shell standing. Blankets of snow in the nearby buildings kept the fire from spreading. Hot embers were reported to have fallen up to 2 miles away. A defective chimney was thought to have been the cause. A fireproof cement vault saved many of the town records, but many other records not in the safe were destroyed. While the fire apparatus was able to be saved and was used to help fight the fire, the building itself was a total loss. Estimated loss was put at $50,000. All town departments, the American Legion, the Red Cross suffered losses and all had to be relocated. Because of the high insurance rate, the town was protected only to the extent of $28,000. The post office was moved to the center railroad station on Park Street. The fire department and the apparatus were moved to the Medfield garage and Dewar's garage until the new town hall was completed later that fall. It would then return to the location in the basement, the lower level of town hall, where it would stay until the North Street fire station, where you guys are now, was built in 1961. In 1924, Alan Kingsbury was again appointed chief. He reported the following in his end-of-the-year report. We've had 75 fires this year, 43 alarm, 32 still, 4 in buildings, 2 oil stoves, 1 motor vehicle, 1 at Medfield State Hospital, and 53 grass and wood fires. Kingsbury urged townspeople to call the fire department when a fire first starts. It will save time and property. Also, call us in case of accidents or drownings. We are always willing to help. We are now equipped with apparatus with electric lights, which makes it safer for the public and safer for us, especially during nighttime hours. Land had been given for the building of a new water supply and reservoir on Spring Street. We have no special alarm, and I do not think it advisable, as it only hampers the firefighters having a crowd and automobiles around. We call attention to the fact that the fire apparatus responding to a fire has the right-of-way on streets. Anyone cutting in not only endangers the firemen's lives, but their own lives, and makes themselves a liability to fines. Up at the state hospital now had a hydrant located near the center of the grounds, used for protection of that area. And the American Brick Company just installed a hydrant near their plant, which could be used when needed. Fire of undetermined origin completely destroyed the laundry building up at Medfield State Hospital, resulting in a loss of $70,000, including $10,000 in clothing. By 1925, the fire department budget now reached $3,000. The Twin Ash Farm on North Street was partially destroyed by fire that year as the Medfield and Dover firefighters laid a line of hose from the pond at the American Steam Packing Company more than half a mile away to provide water to fight the fire. In 1928, the department apparatus consisted of 1 motor chemical truck, 1 motor hose truck, 1 motor Rio pump, and 1 horse-drawn pump. In 1929, a Seagrave 600-gallon pump engine was bought at the cost of $8,000. On April the 29th, 1932, fire in Rocky Woods burnt a total of 580 acres, costing the town $714 to extinguish. Help was called from the departments of Dover, Millis, Walpole, Westwood, Norwood, Foxborough, Needham, Wellesley, and Natick to combat the Rocky Woods fire. Throughout this time period, Alan Kingsbury and Edgar Allen served under the title of Board of Fire Engineers. In 1933, the Ford fire truck was purchased, replacing the 15-year-old chemical truck. In 1934, several water holes were constructed in remote parts of the town. These proved useful when fires occurred in that vicinity. The Fire Chiefs Club of Massachusetts adopted a plan to provide fundamental training to as many of the firemen in the state as possible. The plan was particularly designed to reach the small towns where volunteer firemen operated without the benefit of local drill towers. 4 Medfield firemen completed the course of instruction given at the training school in Brookline. In 1936, the fire department gave the hose truck to the moth department, where it was put to good use. This left the Seagrave pump, the Rio pump, and the Ford forest fire truck in the department. In 1940, owing to the unsafe condition of the Rio pump, it was discontinued. It was replaced in 1941 with a new fire truck. Also in 1940, we got some pictures of it up there, of the Ralph Wheelock School on Pleasant Street, burned to the ground. I'm going to stop at this point and introduce 2 very special people in this town, and that is Walter Reynolds and Joe Ryan. And I'm going to ask them to come up, and if they could reminisce a little bit from World War II to the years that they were in the fire department. I know Walter served for some 35 years. His father before that had served for 46 years. Bill Reynolds had served for 25 years. So the Reynolds family certainly has contributed an awful lot to the town of Medfield. Joe Ryan, of course, has been a mainstay of our fire department. Bob Larkin used to tell a great story. I don't know if it's true or not. But I guess Joe used to work for Bob Larkin at his liquor store. And Bob Larkin said, Joe's a great guy, he said, but I would never hire him again, he said, because every time there was a fire, he was the only one in the store. He'd race out of the store, leave it open. I'd come in, there would be no one in the liquor store except for the customers. And he would run to the fire. Walter Reynolds and Joe Ryan.
Yeah, I look back and I listen to all the old fires that went on in the community, and I used to listen to the old timers talk about it. And that what got me interested in it. My uncle was a firefighter, proud firefighter with that old engine 1. And World War II came about. Some of the fellows went off to war and they had auxiliary firefighters. Well, in those days, we had, after the Ralph Wheelock School fire, we had 2 sessions at the PAF Center. That's where we went to school. And it was about 5 of us, if I remember right. We were appointed auxiliaries. We couldn't go into a structure building, but we could go to the grass fires, you know? The ones where you had to really work and carry a pumpkin on your back. And down, come up North Street where the old Model B had picked us up, and off we went to the different fires. But it was a leg in getting started in the fire service, you know. I went off in the service, come back, and was appointed on the fire department in 47. I was proud, you know, Christ's sakes. Get on that fire, oh. Run like a deer from Adams Street all the way downtown. I never had a car. No car to go to the station. And I served as a firefighter up till I threw my hat in the ring when the chief's appointment was coming up after Walter's father retired. He was the chief, Walter Reynolds. And I got the appointment, and I started in July 1st, 1970. Well, the town was really growing, and I was all alone. But the town saw fit to bring a fire chief on board full-time, because Hindy was on for 2 years, and then I went on. So in the meantime, there was all kinds of work to do. Inspections, we were growing, really growing. Medfield Gardens, Tilden Village, the schools. And I had a young fellow that my captain came to the station and he wanted to come up. He enjoyed being with the fires because his father was a captain in the fire department. And his name was Freddie Rogers. I mean, you people probably know him, but some of you might not. He is in a wheelchair, and boy, he knew what he was doing. He was a good speaker on the radio, and he was concise. He didn't do a lot of jibber jabbering, like some towns. They talk and they talk the fire out, you know. So Freddie and I got along good, and boy, he was my right arm. I'll never forget the fire that was across the street. You know, I knew Urban was coming, renewal business, and I always kidded Freddie afterwards. I said, Freddie, how did you miss that? The lady over and back on Castle Avenue called it in. It was a big house there where the new apartments are. I said, Freddie, you're right here, you're looking right out there. Looking at the desks is there, you're looking. I says, I know, you were snoozing. You know, but in the meantime, I went through a lot of, like you say, a lot of growth. And I really enjoyed the work. And I had some good fires, but it didn't have a cellar hole. None of them. Might have taken a room or two off or the roof off, but I never had a cellar hole. And that was because of the members in the department were very good. They were good. They were good firefighters. Sure, they might bark once in a while, why didn't you do this? Why didn't you make me a lieutenant? But you had to put up with that stuff, you know? That was all part of the department. So in the meantime, after doing all these inspections, and then we had the wood stove business come in, you had to inspect those. Smoke detectors, I'm still the only fellow, you know, full time. I'm all alone. I had a lot of work to do. Of course, I had the deputy, but I could go out of town because I knew he could handle it. But when I went, you know, and I had a few nice trips. Chiefs go to the International here and there, went to New Orleans, I went out to Los Angeles. And, you know, I see a lot of that part of the country. And in those days, you know, it didn't cost much to go that far, but you still had to fight for it. You know, to have the money to pay for the airplane and for the housing, the lodging. But after, they were good. They treated me well. Everybody backed me up. And all those years and all the five I had, one fella got hurt. And he got his leg broken between a vehicle and the fire truck. We were moving out of the way. And other than that, I've enjoyed my career in the fire service. The committee, they gave me a retirement. I retired in 1989. And here I am today. I don't want to talk too long because with all the fires we had before I was born, if I start talking all the fires, we'll be here till 10:30, 11 o'clock. So I'm going to turn it over to Walter, my deputy. And I appreciated being here with you. And
Joe, before you go, what was the worst fire you ever faced?
the worst one,
Yeah.
I'm glad you brought it up because not too many people remember this. Because I said to one of my firefighters the other day, I met him, and he says, you know, what are you going to talk about? Well, I says, you know, do you remember the night we went out? And between 11 o'clock and 3 o'clock in the morning, I had 3 structures. The little building up by the back of the hospital, where the cemetery used to be, where the number 6 well is. We no more than finished there and got the call, you know, urban renewal. The big house, the old Connors house, you know that house down there, Edie? On Main Street, the last house on the left, John Connors? Joy, that went up. We hadn't even got through that. And here comes another call up here, Hospital Road. 3 in one night. And these guys did one great job. That's a lot of work, and nobody got hurt. And that's another flower in your hat. If nobody gets hurt, you know, that's the biggest thing with fires. Today, we got a lot of nice equipment. Communications. Like I say, when I first went on, it was the pump can on your back. That was it. You pull the hose. You pull the hose in those days. So, other than that, you know, I'm not going to go list all the fires. In my booklet up back there is the medical building over here was that big one. And of course, the other one was the laundromat. A lot of people forget about that laundromat used to be over here. My heart was in my throat thinking that there was a lady and a daughter was living up above that. And when I got down there, was I thankful to see her standing out front, because that thing was going. And then at 5:30 in the evening. So other than that, I'm still here. I'll be 82 next July, that's it.
Hi, I'm Walter Reynolds. I'm a retired deputy chief. I can't top Joe's trips that we paid for. But anyway, I hope you enjoyed it. I got my introduction to the fire department at a very young age. I think, as they tell me, my mother wheeled me in the baby carriage to the last part of the old Medfield Inn, which was over here it burned years ago, and then that was the finish in the middle of the night, and she told me that I would be a fireman. That was my beginning of being a firefighter. So I went to many more in the carriage as we lived near the center of town, and my mother and father and Clint Clark's mother and father were neighbors and friends, and the men went off with the fire whistle and the women ran with the baby carriage. So that was what happened in those days. But anyway, Joe talks about big fires. I forget those, but I know they were bonfires compared to Schaefer Paper in Walpole, which was the worst fire that, I mean, I have a little bit of a feeling of what they went through in 9/11 when a fire like that was a waste paper factory. We tried to save, at the time was, Ed Allen was the chief, and he was a pretty clever firefighter. So we went in with 2 engines, and there were already 6 or 7 other towns there. But they were all taking from the same water main. We found another water main and hooked our Seagrave up, and we went in to try and save 3 houses along Common Street before the high school in Walpole. Well, I forget who was there. Jimmy, were you with us over there? No. No. But anyway, we were in between, and that was the days of the old rubber coats, and that was about it. But we were in between 2 houses, and both of them, without any visible fire, just from radiant heat, exploded. So we had fire on both sides of us. We pulled out, and we did save the 3rd one. I don't know how to this day. But it was quite a fire. It was the explosions from those trucks blowing up was something else, and they were a little bit frightening. Again, Joe talked about the auxiliary. Ed Allen, again, who was the fire chief for years, and he was very handy. There was a train hit a sugar truck up in the Harding Crossing, a sugar truck going up to the state hospital, killed the driver. But the town bought the truck, the chassis, and Ed Allen and Freddie Rogers, who was a captain on the department, made this 1934 Model B forest fire truck. They made it. It was their pride and joy. So the auxiliary got to ride on it all the time. And we had a fire up in Holliston, a mutual aid call, a brush fire. And the fellow that, because the older guys were all in the service now. This is like 42, 43. And we went to Holliston with Ed Penniman. I don't know if some of you know Ed Penniman, but he wasn't a very good driver. Wonderful guy. So we get up there, and he was riding the clutch. And this, of course, was Ed Allen's pride and joy. I mean, he built this thing, and I was, as a kid, hung around watching him build it and handing him tools and that stuff. And he finally, he said, he was just smoking, the thing was. So he took Mr. Penniman and kicked him out, and he said, Walter, you drive that truck. Well, I was hooked. I mean, how could I? Here's a kid, 16 years old, now driving the fire truck. And he needed a special license. In fact, I even got to drive it home, and I don't remember if I had a driver's license or not. I don't think so. And you needed a special license before, because I remember worrying all the way home as somebody's going to stop me. But I was hooked forever. I mean, I just was a born fireman then. From then on, that was it. But the auxiliary was a great thing for this town. And I was in the auxiliary, and then I went into the military in 1944 and got out and sweat out getting on the fire department, because in those days you were voted in. You weren't appointed. You were voted. If the members didn't like you for some reason, you didn't get on. So 1947 I finally made it. And but we had a lot of fires over the years, and I served under 5 chiefs, and so that was, we had a lot of fun, and we had a lot of hard work. And Joe said when he was chief, I was running a business here in town, and I was ruining a suit a week. It was that kind of a business. And I also had to, when Joe was away or too busy, I would do a lot of the inspections, and it kept taking away from the business. And so in 1982, I went down to the retirement board, and we had a little discussion, and I found out that my retirement was more than I was getting paid, and I said, where do I sign? So that was 1982. I was an ex-firefighter. But it has been it was a good ride. It was really good. We built, in my tenure in the department, we bought a couple of trucks, and we designed a front-end pumper, which, because there were, in the older days, most of the firemen worked within running distance of I mean, there was the Will's Hardware, there was this place and that place, and the meat markets, and all of that. And but as time went on, so it was nothing for a piece of apparatus to go out on the first call with 2 guys in the truck. So we did design a front-end pumper that one man could put out quite a fire all by himself. So it worked very good over the years, but then things got better, and they got more firefighters, and now with some of the apparatus, I had the opportunity to spend some time at the fire station a couple of years ago, and I look at some of that apparatus, and I don't know, it's just mind-boggling, but it does a job. So I guess that's about all the baloney you want to hear from me. Thank you.
I don't know, Walter, before you sit down, whether there was a best story that you remember from your dad?
What's that?
Is there a story, the best story you remember from the time your dad was on the department?
Yeah.
He goes back into the 20s.
Yes, he did. 24. Which one was it?
I don't know.
So many. I don't know, we were talking, but it just that he did get in on he got in right after he lived in Medfield when the town hall burned for the last time, and he had a lot of stories about that. And, but other than that, I can't think of anything.
I had the opportunity in 1982 to interview Hindi Reynolds. The story I liked, he said that on holidays, like the 4th of July and Halloween, he said the fire department crew would be at the station all night long. The kids back then, and that's probably some of the people in this crowd now, would then light hay on fire and shoot fireworks on the 4th of July. One 4th of July, Hindi said, he recalled, they had 50 fire runs in one night. He said he was glad the kids today are a lot more careful. Let me end, we have our chief of the fire department, Bill Kingsbury, who comes from a long line of Kingsburys that have served this town for a great deal of time. And Bill, you ask you to come up.
Thank you. Very interesting stories. It's kind of interesting here about Waldo Kingsbury and his interest of fire apparatus, because it's kind of one of my pet projects I have. I joined the department back in 1972. I was fresh out of high school. I was working for the highway department, and the then chief, Joe Ryan, came along when I was working for the highway department and asked me if I'd be interested in joining the fire department. Well, I had the opportunity to tag along with George Financi over when I was growing up, and that's what really sparked my interest in the fire service. So as soon as I was asked, I jumped on the opportunity. So in August of '72, I joined, and through the years, we did a lot of training in the department. I was with my deputy, Chick Seavey. We did a lot together. And then Joe had the faith in me to appoint me to a lieutenant. I think it was in 70, let me see, I'm trying to think, probably early 80s I think it was, that I was appointed lieutenant, and then to captain. And then Joe decided to retire, and I was fortunate enough to apply for the job, and I'm in the present position now. So I was appointed chief in July of 1989. The rest is history, I guess. My first big fire, and Joe had mentioned, was the laundromat. Just after I got on, I can remember I lived on Brook Street, coming out of the back, opened the back door, and you could see the glow in the sky. And you can remember it just like it was yesterday. Phil Pemba, he lived on Main Street. He drove the truck that night, and I think it was he and I on the truck, the first truck going into the fire. But it's just one of those things you never ever forget. And over those years. And there they go. But anyway, I kind of threw together a little timeline and some of the interesting things that, since I've been chief, what has transpired in the way of technology, some of the fires of note. I'll try to keep it brief, but in 1989, when I became chief, I had a little baptism by fire, because I was chief in July, and in August I had my first house fire. It was on Bridge Street, the McIntyre house. Basement fire burnt through the first floor. We had pull up to the front of the house, and Mr. McIntyre's rolling out the front door. It was, we had some smoke inhalation, but there was no injuries. Fortunate for him, his family wasn't home. The rest of the family wasn't home that night. So, but that was my baptism to the job. That year, our association, through donations and the association funds, it was brought to our attention that the hand tub was available if we wanted to buy it, and that was located in Norwell. So we were able to bring the 1874 hand tub back to Medfield and to keep it for our collection. Also in 1989, we had the first computer in the fire station. When Joe left, he said we needed a computer. When I started, I was like, a computer? I said, what do we do with that? No idea. And also, I was one of the ones that had I had an aluminum helmet and a rubber coat and 3/4 boots when I started. So one of my goals was to get better equipment for the guys, and we, in 1989, we switched to bunker pants. We now have from 3/4 boots to bunker pants. 1990, busy year, had 298 fire calls, and of those, 50 were to the Medfield State Hospital. Kept us kind of busy. Town meeting, we voted through legislation that would require sprinkler systems in new construction of four residential units and up, which is in place today. We think back of the town hall fires, it's kind of ironic that it burnt twice, and on the third time it was remodeled, they finally sprinkled it. So, 1991, another structure fire on Pine Grove Road, a little bungalow cottage, was suspicious. Our first mobile phone was installed in my '87 Crown Victoria. That was like a big event. It was about that big, wired to the car. And after 43 years of service, George Financi retired. So that was in '91. In '92, we had a severe snowstorm. During that storm period, we answered 150 calls. And as far as equipment, we replaced our 62 International. You see pictures of it over there. It's an open cab. Not quite sure why we ever had an open cab pumper in New England, but it was the trend. Everything's a trend in fire service. But we were able to replace it. It was an open cab, 750-gallon, two-stage pump with a 5-speed transmission. Most of the older guys know here that if you missed a shift with that, you had to stop and start over. It was a bear to drive. But we were able to replace it. I don't even know what that cost, Walter? The International, it wasn't 12 to 15,000. Well, in '92, our current engine 2 was $190,000, and but it had a fully enclosed cab and seating for all personnel. Had 1,000 gallons of water and a 1,250-gallon a minute pump. So we're progressing. That year, we also, as a fitting end to retired Chief Clark's camp, we had a live burn training evolution there with multiple towns. We burnt it to the ground. Ceremonial send-off for that. And also that year, Lieutenant Clint's here someplace, I think it's after 40 years of service, he retired, as well as the late Jim Tuberty. He retired after 27 years of service. 93, started experiencing problems with our ladder truck. We're on a third used ladder. Our first one was a 38 Seagrave we bought from Revere. I was about this big when I remember coming to town. Then we bought a used one from Wellesley, I believe the next one was, and then Needham was the last one, I think the 1963 Persh from Needham. We converted all our supply line from 2.5-inch and 3-inch to large diameter 4-inch, another new trend. And we updated the Chief's car from a '97 Crown Victoria to a 4-wheel drive Bronco, so we could go around in the winter. Big. Fires of note that year were Evasian's barn on Dale Street and the Ann Chick's vacant house on South Street at the same time. And we also had, it was an interesting call as we branch out into many things. When all else fails, you call the fire department. We had an oil spill that was 4 miles long, and some of the other guys remember it was from Allen Lane. They were hauling, a dump truck was hauling stuff, and he broke a hydraulic line. It went from Allen Lane all the way through the center of town, so it was over 4 miles long. We had cars slipping and sliding, and very interesting. And after 32 years of service, that year Charlie Grover retired. So we have some real dedicated people that were serving. 94, 316 calls. We upgraded our air packs from a large 2.2 Scott air pack to a smaller, lighter 4.5. We're getting good at burns. We did a multi-town live burn on the Balco property on South Street, which is now known as Gristmill Road. The house is there. So we did a training evolution there. With the pending town hall renovations, our association built the current garage behind the station to house our antiques, because the association maintains ownership of the Seagrave, the 29 Seagrave, and the hand tub. So that equipment is in the garage, and the association is credited to building that to house them. It's a great thing for that. A notable fire that year was we had on Camelot Lane, it was an interesting fire. We had a gas meter ice over, and it sent excess pressure into the basement via the gas burner and the water heater, so it was like a major blowtorch in the basement, which burnt up through the first floor. 95, special town meeting was a big event. They voted to spend $425,000 to replace our 63 Persh with a new ladder truck, which is the current Pierce ladder truck that we have. Our big fire for that year was Heidke's on Stewart Street. You guys remember that? That was fully involved on arrival. It's down the south end of town. After 38 years of service, the late Charlie Evans retired that year. 96, we took delivery of a ladder truck. It's a 75-foot Pierce with a 1250 pump, 500 gallons of water, and a pre-piped waterway. No more ropes to run the ladder pipe. That was a big plus. We had a house fire on South Street. I know Dave remembers it because he and I went in and grabbed a woman that was sitting in the living room. The place was full of smoke. Couldn't see your hand in front of your face, and all you could hear was her talking in the living room. So that was down at 110 South Street. That was a good stop and a good save. And after 24 years, we mentioned Fred Rogers. He retired from volunteer service, so that was in 96. 97 brought about the carbon monoxide alarm. Everybody was getting them, and we did probably over 40 to 50 investigations that year for carbon monoxide alarms. Also that year, on July 1st, a little bit of history. Jeff Bonotti's here. He was our first full-time firefighter. July 1st, we hired our first full-time firefighter, along with Danny Smith, the police officer at the time. We took over the ambulance service, brought it into the fire station. 98, we did a combination of fire and ambulance runs of 803. Lords that year did a fundraiser. There's some information up there. They did a fundraiser on our thermal imaging helmet. It was a community-wide event. It was a nice time. It was interesting. We did 225 resale inspections that year in Medfield, so it was a busy year for real estate. We hired our second full-time firefighter, and we had a few structure fires of note were Upham Road Apartments, Onondaga Road, and House on Green Street. We had a few cellar holes. I think they didn't have cellars for Joe. 1999, we had 905 fire and ambulance calls. We upgraded our radio system to the current high band, no more low band radios that we used to have the bad summer days. We'd monitor it and we'd hear the fishing boats and the Portuguese talking on the skip on the radio, so that was a real nuisance. And July of that year we spent 3 days, a lot of the guys can remember the 3 days we spent in Dover on the 90+ degree days with 50-acre brush fires that we had over there. It was brutal, but the guys persevered. Also in 99, the city of Worcester lost 6 firefighters in a warehouse fire. We sent our engine 2 to Worcester headquarters to cover their station for a day. And then in the weeks to follow, our association members canvassed the town and raised $12,000 for their charity, so to be commended for that work. After 47 years of service, Bob Kennedy, and after 42 years, Jim Callahan retired. In 2000, upgraded my car. we got an inflatable boat and a new ambulance. And they put together a municipal building and planning committee. And still talking about it. 2001, we did 1,066 calls. We had a March snowstorm with heavy rains. We pumped over 40 cellars that month, that storm. We also hired 2 more full-time firefighters, which gave us the ability to cover fire and ambulance 16 hours a day, Monday through Friday. Also, in 2001, we had the terrorist attack in New York. We were put on a standby task force to be deployed to New York if we needed. The state was putting together a task force, so we were a part of that. But it also brought about suspicious packages and white powder incidents. We had probably over 30, 40 calls for people paranoid that, you know, they had anthrax and paper and things, so we had to be trained and we had to respond to that. So you can see how our roles have changed over the years. In October, a lot of the members participated in making the 350th birthday party a success. We were able to get a firefighter safety grant. We got a new thermal imager, cold water rescue suits, and personal pass alerts for each member. One of the things we had that year, a lot of the guys remember, is we had a difficult rescue on Hearthstone. We had a worker that was repairing a stone wall, and it collapsed on top of him and put him up against a wooden shed, an outbuilding that we ended up cutting the wall out of the outbuilding to get him out, and after we propped up the wall. But it was a pretty tense situation for a little while, but you know, it just showed that the teamwork that transpires, we get the job done. In 2002, we started off with a bang on Nebo Street, the Aronson house. The cold winter night, fully involved on arrival, tough fire, it was up on a hill. We also, that year, we had a power line down in Baxter Park that sent a power surge across town. And we had 15 simultaneous calls and one which was a house fire on Walden Court, so we were stretched to the limit that day too. We were able to receive grant money for confined space rescue in our mobile air supply that we have a trailer for air supply now. It was grant money. So in '03, we had 933 calls. In March of that year, we had our first fatal fire in over 50 years. Investigation, we think it was a medical event prior to the fire, but again, it was our first one that we've encountered in over 50 years. Our engine 3 was returned to service after a major refurbishment, and it was converted into our rescue pump. Carries all our extrication tools. We placed into service an ATV, a hazmat trailer, and a pickup truck. In 2004, 1,026 calls, a real cold house fire in Millis. I mean, any guys that were there, they remember that. It's over on Forest Road. We went fishing for a car in the river. That was another difficult thing to do, but we had a house fire on Granite Street. It was the Newell's house. And then we went searching for the missing person in August and September in Millis. That was like a week each time, it seemed like. And that brings us to 2005, January 1st, we hired 4 more full-time firefighters, which gives us coverage of 2 firefighter EMTs, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So that was a big milestone for us. Which brings us to today.
What's the greatest need you see for the fire department now?
Personnel is a big thing now, trying to maintain. We have a very dedicated group of on-call people. Every town around is facing difficulty in maintaining that, but we strive to do our best with that. We have space needs for the station. Our equipment equipment is so much bigger than it used to be. I think Walter and Joe could probably attest to the fact that when the station was built, it was probably criticized of being overbuilt, because the trucks at that time looked lost in it. But I guess it was Ed Allen that was instrumental in making it as big as it was. But he had the vision that it was, it lasted probably a lot more longer than most would. But we have, our needs are different. We have different equipment. We will be replacing, we have a 30-year-old engine that I have up for replacement this year, at a price of $375,000. If we don't get that, I'll probably ask the selectmen to increase my budget by $500,000. It worked once, I think it worked again. So, short of that, that's it. That's all I got.
Yes, Jimmy?
Richard, I noticed that we have an awful lot of people here who are either present or past firefighters, and I think it would be nice if we could acknowledge them. Would they stand up so we could just say thank you?
Think about it, they really, every day, if there's a fire, they put their life on their line, they protect our homes, they protect our families. We're in debt to you guys, thank you very much. We have a special cake that's up there, I'd like to actually ask Bill to cut that. If we could have those same past and present firefighters go up, we're going to get a picture of as many of you as possible for the Historical Society. We're starting to age here.
And one more thing, don't ever ask Richard a question. All I asked him was, when did the fire department start? This is where we're at.
Well, we got you in here.
No, it's great.
We got you to cut that up there.